What's up guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at some Vanguard again. This is a deck profile of my Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom Aqua Force build. And we're going to be taking a look at it today because it's a little bit different to what a lot of people are running over in Japan. And this is a build that I've been playing around with for a couple of, well, about a month now. So let's get into the build. So the first card that I'm running is Officer Cadet Eric. It's obviously your regular starter. When you ride over it, you draw a card. For the trigger lineup, I'm running 4 heals as standard because you always want to heal. I'm running 4 Perfect Guard draw triggers, again standard because you need Perfect Guards. I'm running 6 critical triggers. This is different to a lot of builds. A lot of builds like to run front triggers instead and run a couple of critical triggers if any. I like to run extra crits because they add extra pressure to your swings. And a lot of people are going to say that by not running front triggers, you risk your rear guards not being able to hit because of damage triggers and defense triggers. And this is totally wrong, and I'm going to explain that later when I show off some combos. But I'm running 6 critical triggers for the extra pressure. I'm running finally 2 front triggers. The reason I'm running 2 different front triggers is to play mind games with the opponent. If they see this one and this one come up, they think I'm playing at least 6, if not 8 front triggers, and so they will guard in a way that makes it seem makes them feel safer. So for example, if they see me guard with these 2 and they've only seen maybe 1 crit all game, and my Maelstrom's swinging, they might not guard me because they won't think that I've got any extra criticals in my deck that I might check, and so they might get surprised and lose because of that, because of their mistake. For the grade 1 lineup, also, by the way, also if you check a front trigger and a critical trigger together, you pretty much won. There's basically nothing anyone can do against that unless they have like the perfect hand to guard with, and even then they cripple themselves. So on to the grade 1s. So what we have on the grade 1s, we have 4 Tier Knight Theo. Tier Knight Theo is the best grade 1 in the deck. He has the ability that when its attack hits, or if it boosted and the unit that it boosts hits, and if it was the second battle of the turn or more, I can choose one of our other Aqua Force units and it gains 8,000 power until the end of the turn. Now this is important because this lets you hit really nice numbers on your columns, because a lot of your columns swing for numbers like 20,000 or 15,000 or 25,000, which are nice numbers, but what we're aiming for is multiples of either 13,000, 18,000 or 23, 28, so on. Because let's show you an example. So over here, say we have a Force Clan Vanguard. So this is Soul Savior Dragon. He has 13,000 base power. If I swing at you for 15,000, you only have to drop 5,000 guard. But if I swing at you for 18,000, you now have to drop 10,000 guard. And that's a big difference. So let's say that I'm swinging at you for that 15,000 again, but this time I had 8,000. Now you're having to drop at least 15,000 shield instead of the usual 5,000. So it bumps you up 2 entire shield value, which is really good. You usually want to put this behind your Vanguard so that they either want to guard the Vanguard to make your 3rd and 4th attacks less pressureful, or so that you're pretty much guaranteed a hit because they won't want to guard the Vanguard because they need to guard the 3rd and 4th attacks, and so you'll make them nice and beefy and they have to drop even more cards from their hand. A lot of the time I see people not guarding the Vanguard because this card's, even when this card's behind them, and it's a big mistake. The next grade 1 we're running is Light Signal's Penguin Soldier. What this card does is if it's the 4th battle of the turn or more and your unit attacks, you can retire this unit to countercharge 1, which means you have more resources to play with for using the cards in your grade 2 lineup and Diamantes, and to use Maelstrom's power-up ability, which I'll get into later. His other ability is if he's behind a unit or in the same column as a unit, you can put him in front, and you rest him, you can give 5,000 power to that unit in front of it. And you might be wondering, well, why is that good? He can already boost for 8,000. Why would I want to give 5,000 instead? And the reason is we have a lot of restanding units, and so if you boost, say, Tidal Assault and swing for 17, and then Tidal Assault restands, he's only got 9,000 to go for. But if you give his boost from Penguin Soldier, he'll have 14,000 power, and he'll be swinging twice for 14,000, and so he'll have more chance of hitting. Typically, it's a very niche situation where you'll actually use that though, because against a lot of decks, you want to be swinging with this first and then third, and on the third swing you want them to guard for more, and so you'll be swinging for 20 instead of 17, which is sometimes better in certain situations in certain decks. But I'll get into that in a minute. And now our final grade 1 slot is going on Influent Dagger, 4 of them. So Influent Dagger has the ability that when it attacks, when your unit attacks and it's the third or more battle of the turn, he gains 3,000 power, and that stacks. So if you attack with a unit for the third attack, including itself, it becomes 10,000 power. If it is the fourth battle of the turn, it becomes 13,000. Fifth battle of the turn, it becomes 16,000. And this is really nice for hitting good numbers by boosting. So if you put this behind, say, a Basil or a Shotgun Assault on the fourth or fifth attack, you're hitting really nice numbers against Force Clans. So that's why I like to run Influent Dagger. There's also another niche use for him. He only has 7,000 base power, which is a lot less, which means you can actually starve your opponent of Counterblast early in decks that need it. So for example, against decks like Kagero, they have a grade 2 unit called Berserk Dragon, and what he does is when you ride him, you can Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, retire a unit and draw a card. And so if you deny them that Counterblast, they can't do that, and they have to either waste the ability when they ride it or save the Berserk Dragon for later, and so they get held back, which is very nice. There are other decks you'll also want to starve as well, but that was just an example. For the grade 2s, we run 4 Marine General of the Restless Tide Algos. His ability is, if he's on the rearguard circle and he attacks, and it's the first battle of the turn, he can Counterblast 1 to stand again. So you get 2 attacks at this guy, which is really nice. He also has an ability while it's on the Vanguard circle, which helps us rush early game if we want to. And that is when it attacks, if it is the second battle of the turn or more, we can Counterblast and Soul Blast and stand a different rearguard. So you'll want to swing with something first, then swing with Algos, and then stand the rearguard that attacked. This is a risky play because your opponent could get damage triggers, and you can't guarantee that the damage trigger won't stop you from hitting, and so you can waste resources doing this, but it's often nice to do this if you go first and you want to rush down a deck that's quite aggressive. I often rush down decks like Aqua, other Aquaforce decks I do like to rush against as well, because they have really bad card generation advantage, so oftentimes they can't guard. But I also like to rush against Kagero, because if I'm going first, because despite them having the Berserk Dragon access, getting them up to 3 damage really puts the pressure on and makes them drop lots of cards in their hand, which means that later turns, when they run into Waterfall, and I can block them because I've guarded well in the early game, they won't be able to guard against Maelstrom with my 5 attack swings, and so it's quite nice to rush them as well. Other decks, you probably want to rush Protect Clans too, but yeah, oftentimes it depends on the resources in your hand. I usually like to only rush if I have 2 restanding units in addition to Algos, so oftentimes you'll just see me ride him and attack, and I won't actually use his ability. The second grade 2 that we have is Tidal Assault. He's basically the same as Marine General of the Restless Tide Algos. When he attacks, you can Soul Blast 1 to restand him, and then if it's the second battle of the turn or more and you did this, he loses 5,000 power. So this is a bit more flexible. So he still stands and has 9,000 power if you attack first with him. So he's basically an Algos clone at that point. But you can also do it later in the turn and have him stand with 4,000 power, which is nice when you get trigger units such as critical triggers, because then you can swing twice with a crit and they have to guard more. Generally though, you'll want to be attacking first with them. So these are our restanding units, the Algoses and the Tidal Assaults. I'm running 8 restanding units, and to counter that, I'm also running 5 units that have immense power on the third or more battle. The reason I want units that have extreme power on the third or more battle is because Maelstrom's effect triggers on the third or more battle when their rearguard attacks, and you need them to hit, and so the bigger the number, the more pressure you put on your opponent and the more they have to guard. And so having a rearguard that can swing for big numbers is always good. So we're going to look at these now. So we got Storm Rider Basil. Storm Rider Basil's ability is when it attacks a Vanguard, if it's the third more battle of the turn, you can counterblast 1 and it gains 5,000 power. And if it was the fourth or more battle of the turn, it gains 10,000 instead. So it can swing for 19,000 if it's the fourth battle of the turn or more. And with a Maelstrom boost, it's 22 by itself, which is really nice, because that means if you're against a Axel or Protect clan and they get a trigger, you can still hit with Basil, which is really nice. If you put him on the Axel circle, he's swinging 32, so it doesn't even matter if they get a trigger at that point. And also, if you hit with, say, something boosted with Theo, he's swinging for 30 by himself, 40 on an Axel circle, which is huge, and they have to guard that and drop a lot of cards from their hand in doing so. In Aqua Force, you want them to drop as many cards from their hand as possible. It's less about the guard value, but the higher your power is, the more likely they are to drop more cards from their hand blocking it. And then Shotgun Assault is basically the same as Basil, just a bit more flexible, and uses a more valuable resource. So Shotgun Assault is, if it's the third or more battle of the turn, you can Soul Blast 1 and it gains 8,000 power. So that may sound weaker than Basil, but he still hits pretty good numbers by himself. So Basil hitting 19 by himself, this guy hits 17 by himself, which is still good against Axel clans. And when boosted by an 8,000, while you have a Maelstrom out and using his ability, he hits a really, really nice 28,000, which is good against Force clans. And then Basil only hits 30,000, which is basically the same, which is why I think they're quite equal. The reason I run less Shotgun Assault is because of having a limited soul. We don't have many units that... We don't have any units, actually, that build soul. And so we have a limited resource there, which is mainly used for tidal assaults. But oftentimes, in the late game, I'll just not use tidal assault, and I'll rather use the Shotgun Assault for the extra pressure. So moving on to the grade 3s, and the last card of the deck. We are running 4 Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom, which is the main card of the deck. So what does Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom do? What he does is you counterblast 1, and all of your front row units get power plus 3,000 until the end of turn. And while that doesn't seem very significant, it's pretty good. It means if you boost him for 8,000, he's hitting 23, which is a good number against Force clans, who have the higher base power. He's also letting your restanding units hit 12,000 power, which is really nice for them to swing at a rearguard, stand, and then be boosted to hit something else. It's letting your Shotgun and Basils hit really nice numbers when boosted as well. And it's letting your grade 3s such as Storm Rider Diamantes and Riptide Dragon hit Force numbers by themselves, which is really nice. His second ability, which is the main ability for him, is when your rearguard's attack hits a Vanguard and it was the third or fourth battle of the turn, you discard 2 cards and stand him, which means you get another attack with Maelstrom and 2 more drive checks to potentially get extra triggers. And as we saw in my live stream earlier, I managed to hit 4 triggers because of this ability, which is rare, but it just showcases the reason why people need to guard the third and fourth battles of the turn. But this puts on lots of pressure because it means your opponent loses cards in their hand, which means that later in the game they can't guard, and so you can just smash them with a bunch of damage. And then we have 2 Storm Rider Diamantes. So Diamante's ability is if it's the first attack of the turn, he gains 3,000 power, which means he hits Force numbers by himself, as long as you have Maelstrom out. If you don't have Maelstrom out, you can still hit Force numbers by himself just by having an 8,000 booster behind him. He also has the ability that once per turn, if it attacks and it's the third battle of the turn or more, you can counterblast 1, discard a card, stand him, and he loses 3,000 power until the end of turn. So you can have him swing twice once you've checked a critical trigger, and you can put it on him. And that adds lots of pressure to your opponent to guard him, because if they're at 4 damage, they will lose if he hits. And so your opponent has to drop a lot of cards from hand. Typically, I only like to use this second ability if I've got a critical and I've put it on him, because losing a card from your hand is quite detrimental in Aqua Force, because we don't have any advantage generators. There is literally no card in the entire clan that generates advantage for us. So losing a card from hand and not getting it back is a big cost for us, but it's worth it to rip cards out of your opponent's hand. Because what I like to think of Aqua Force as is a clan that doesn't focus solely on generating advantage, but on equalizing your advantage with your opponent. So you want a similar hand size or bigger than your opponent, but Aqua Force goes around this by making your opponent drop cards from their hand. So rather than you going +3, you'll make your opponent go -5 or so on, just to block your turn, and you can maintain quote unquote advantage that way. And so it's one of those judgment calls on whether you want to use the restanding ability on Diamantes, because it's you go -1, but how minus can you make your opponent go if you do that? So that's a judgment call you have to make in a match. And the final card we run are 2 Riptide Dragons. Riptide was originally laughed at when he was first revealed, but he's actually one of the strongest Aqua Force units in the entire game. He has the ability that when he attacks, and it's the 4th battle of the turn or more, he gains 20,000 power until the end of that battle. Also, he can't attack unless it's the 4th battle or more. And getting to 4 attacks is really easy in Aqua Force. So he's a 32,000 swinger by himself, 35 if you have Maelstrom, and if you're boosting, he's hitting 43, which is a force number. If you put him on an Axel circle, he's hitting 42 by himself, 45 if you have Maelstrom, and if you hit with a Theo, 53, which is immensely hard for your opponent to guard. And if it's the 4th battle and you need to restand Maelstrom, this guy's probably going to let you do it, because your opponent has to pretty much drop their entire hand to guard it, or Perfect Guard, which will get rid of a Sentinel in the hand, which is really nice. So, moving on, we have a combo section of this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a few combos and talk about the various ways we can use this deck to combat Axel, Protect and Force clans in various ways, when we're going first, when we're going second, when they're on grade 2, when they're on grade 3, different situations such as where you should put your triggers and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so here is the combo section of the guide. So I've set up a field here. We have a grade 2 Axel clan Vanguard. All Axel and Protect grade 2 Vanguards have 9,000 power, whereas Force grade 2s, like this one, have 10,000 power. So it's a very small difference, but it's a big difference when your units are swinging for 9,000, so you need to keep it in mind. So what's our ideal first turn setup? So what you want is Maelstrom on Vanguard, obviously, he's the best. You don't want to have other grade 3s as your Vanguard. You want to have a restanding rearguard, such as Tidal Assault or Algos. You want a unit that hits massive numbers. This could be Riptide Dragon, which is the best one to get, or you could have Shotgun Assault or Basil swinging as well. They're both just as good. In the back row, you want a Theo behind your Vanguard. This is so that you have the pressure to make your opponent guard, and if they don't, you can still hit nice numbers if they have a damage trigger. And you want the Light Signals Penguin Soldier. You don't have to have a Light Signals Penguin Soldier here, but you could have Theo, for example. But your opponent's going to ride into a grade 3 with 12,000 power, which makes Penguin Soldier's first ability to rest and give 5,000 power much better. So you want to technically have a Light Signals Penguin Soldier behind if they have an Axel or Protect clan against you. You could also put another Powerhouse unit here, but generally on your first grade 3 turn you don't have enough cards in the hand to fill. Occasionally you do, and if you do, you could put like a Shotgun Assault here and be just as good. But by now you'll have 2 damage, so what you want to do first is Counterblast 1 and give everything in the front row 3,000 power. So this guy becomes 15, Maelstrom becomes 15, Tidal Assault becomes 12, which lets you hit really nice numbers. So your first attack is going to be Tidal Assault. You want to swing a Tidal Assault, you Soul Blast, and you stand Tidal Assault. So he's swinging for 12,000 at this Vanguard. Now even if your opponent hits a damage trigger here, you can still hit, because this is now swinging for 20,000 after the trigger, and he's still on 19,000. So you're still hitting even if they hit a damage trigger, so it's actually safe to hit the Vanguard. Now, in some decks where they like to rush you, they might have other rear guards out, in which case you'll want to swing at the rear guard first to avoid the damage trigger, because then you can force more cards out of the hand in the later turns. But you Soul Blast and that Tidal Assault stand. That's your first attack. Now, typically this will either retire a rear guard, deal them a damage because they want to try. They think they're clever and they can damage. They can negate some of your attacks by getting a damage trigger, which isn't true. So a good player won't take the damage. Or they can guard you with 5,000, which could be an intercept, or it could be a 5,000 shield from hand, like a draw trigger, or a grade 2 that they haven't called. But yeah, Tidal Assault swings, stands. Your second swing is going to be Maelstrom. Now he's going to be swinging for 23,000 because of his own ability, and he's got a Theo behind him. So your opponent wants to guard this, but 23,000 against 9,000 base is really hard to guard. Because even if they put out a trigger, which is enough to block it, I might get a trigger myself and break through. So typically your opponent will no-guard this. You'll get a couple of drive checks, they'll get a damage check, and you get a Theo ability. Now if your opponent checks a damage trigger and gains power, you want to put sometimes when you say if you don't have this Penguin Soldier, you swung for 12, you stood, and now if they hit a damage trigger, this guy can't hit, so you want to put the trigger on Tidal Assault. But if they get a damage trigger and you have the Penguin Soldier, Tidal Assault's still going to hit, so you're going to put everything onto Riptide Dragon. Now one important thing to note is if you check a critical trigger, you don't want to give the critical to your Vanguard. Reason being, it gives the opponent the chance to check two damage triggers, and it also ups the odds that they will check even a single damage trigger, which is, while I say you can still hit, it's still better to not have that damage. It also gives them more counterblast for the following turns, and so instead what you want to do is put it on a different rear guard that they're going to have to guard anyway, so otherwise Maelstrom stands. So for example, you can put it on the Riptide Dragon, and the Riptide's going to be swinging with a crit now, and your opponent has to really guard this, otherwise they're going to take extra damage. So it's much better to put your crits, if they're below 4 damage, on a different rear guard that is not Maelstrom, just for the extra added pressure. Now, after Maelstrom swung, you have the Theo's ability to give something 8,000 power. Typically you want to put this on the biggest unit so that you have a chance to restand Maelstrom if they don't guard it. But if your hand is okay and there's nothing that needs fixing in there, you might want to put it on the Tidal Assault so they have to guard big for both attacks, and they might not be able to do that. And they end up dropping extra cards from the hand because of this, so you'd want to put it on Tidal Assault unless you want to fix your hand, in which case put it on Riptide Dragon. Or if they have a minuscule hand and you know they can't guard this Tidal Assault, you put it on the Riptide Dragon, stand the Maelstrom when the Tidal attacks, and attack it gets put extra triggers on the Riptide Dragon, which is really nice. So what happens if this is a Force Vanguard? So now we get exactly the same field. So it doesn't matter what grade 2 it is. This guy's still swinging for 12, so he can still hit. This guy's still swinging for 23, so he can still hit. Even if they get a damage trigger at this point, this guy's swinging for 20,000, so he can still hit. And this guy's still swinging for a really nice 45,000, which is superb to hit anyway. So you don't really need to change your setup here, except you don't need Light Signal's Penguin Soldier behind your Tidal Assault anymore. You'd much rather have a Theo, because when they have their Force Vanguard of 13,000 out, you don't want to rest the Penguin Soldier anymore, because 17,000 isn't good compared to 20,000 that you could be swinging for. Whereas hitting with a Theo actually gives extra value and pressure that your opponent wants to guard in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, etc. battles of the turn. So it's much better to have a Theo replace the Penguin Soldier if you're against Force clans. So that's just something to keep in mind. But the field setup is identical against Force clans when you're going first. So what if you're going second? So if you're going second and your opponent hit grade 3 first, chances are they also called a rear guard out. So let's just grab a rear guard real quick and say they called this guy to the rear guard circle too. Sorry about that. So what you want to do here is you'll have your standard field setup. Typically you've had an extra turn to build up some resources, so you might even have this shotgun assault here as well, or another grade 3 or something sat here. So let's say you drew another Maelstrom and you called it, for example, that this might be your field on that turn, but typically you want to aim for the same field as before, except this time you use Maelstrom's skill, everything gains 3000, and then you use Penguin's skill and give this 17. The reason you do this is because if you swing for 12,000 at Vanguard, and then restand, and then swing for 20,000, it's the same amount of guard against Axel as if you just swung for 17,000 on the second. And so it's much better to actually swing for more damage on the first attack and on the second attack than to have the biggest second attack. Because 17 twice is much harder for them to guard than 12 than 20. So that's just something to keep in mind. You want to use Penguin Soldier's ability in this sense, but you always want to attack a rear guard with your Tidal Assault, because if your opponent gets a damage trigger, they go to 22,000 and Tidal Assault can suddenly no longer hit. So you want to be swinging at this rear guard, and chances are they'll either guard it with a trigger so that you don't get to retire their really important rear guard, or they'll die. And then Tidal Assault uses its skill and restands, and it still has 17,000 power. Now Maelstrom swings, and your opponent probably guards. If they don't guard, you want to put the Theo on Tidal Assault if they get a damage trigger, because if you put Theo on Tidal Assault, you're suddenly swinging for 25, which means you can still hit them if they get the damage trigger and move up to 22,000. It's the same mentality as before again. If you get a critical trigger and they're not at 4 damage or higher, put it on a rear guard so that you have the extra pressure. Just trust me on this, it works wonders in making people guard. If you check a trigger, what you want to do is actually put it on the Tidal Assault, the power, and put the critical maybe on Riptide if you have it. And then you can put the power from Theo into Riptide Dragon and make him hit even better numbers, or you can put it on this second Maelstrom and make him hit numbers such as 23,000, which is really nice against both Axel and Force Clans. So you need to distribute the power nicely so that even if they hit a damage trigger, you can hit with everything. The third battle is going to be either the 17,000 Tidal Assault or 25,000 Tidal Assault, depending on if you use Theo on it. Or you could swing for 23 with this guy if you put Theo on Maelstrom. So let's say you swing for 23, they have to guard that because otherwise Maelstrom stands, and then you swing for your 45, which is really hard for them to block. They'll probably perfect guard it, and then this guy can swing for another rear guard, or it can swing, and even if they hit damage, it doesn't matter anymore because you don't care about damage triggers, you only care about the amount of counterblast they're getting. So you might actually want to hold off on attacking with Tidal Assault if you think they're going to get too much damage and you don't want them to rush you with their counterblasts. So that's another consideration to take into account. And now we need to look at a Force Clan. So you're on Force. You now, if you look at your field, certain units won't be able to hit. So for example, if you give 3,000 power to Tidal Assault, he's only swinging 12. Because you can't hit the Soul Saber Dragon, which is really annoying for you. So what do you need to do? So the ideal field is actually technically not having Tidal Assault and having something like a Shotgun Assault here, and you can swing for really nice numbers against Force Clans using Shotgun Assault on the third battle. So you'd swing with Maelstrom first, 15. They'd either guard it or not guard it. You'd swing with Maelstrom. And when Theo hits, you put the power on Riptide Dragon, so he hits really nice numbers against Force. He'll be on 53,000, which is really good against Force numbers. Then you swing with Shotgun Assault, you're swinging for 28,000, which is also a good number against Force Clans, and then you swing for the nice 53. But if you can't make a field like that, what you're going to need, say if you had the Tidal Assault out, you want them to have a rear guard out. Typically they will if they're on grade 3, but sometimes they don't. So you can swing with this at their rear guard, restand, and then swing for 20 at their Vanguard for the third attack. And that way you're still hitting them. There's no chance of them hitting a damage trigger. Even if they hit a damage trigger, you can use Theo to shove Tidal Assault up to 28, which means you can still hit. So yeah, that's just all considerations to keep in mind. If you are using Tidal Assault and the Penguin Soldier and they have the rear guard out, you don't want to call this Maelstrom unless you have a booster, because chances are if they get a damage trigger, he's not going to be able to hit and he's going to be wasted and just sit there and not do anything, so it's better just to keep him in your hand if that's the case. But if they do have a rear guard out, you will want the Maelstrom, because the first attack is going to the rear guard, second attack is... wait, I did that backwards, sorry. Yeah, you don't ever want to call Maelstrom without a booster if you have Tidal Assault, just because you won't be able to hit if they get a damage trigger. There's no point in having him out, because if you get a damage trigger, he's useless. So you want to keep him in hand, possibly ride him and get an extra Axel Circle, so you can call something else and have a big number as well. That's just a -1 to use, so that's up to you. If you want to go -1 to neg your opponent even further, that's better. But if you can make a field like, for example, this is like the best field against a Force Clan, just because you can go attack rearguard, restand, attack Vanguard, check a damage trigger maybe, give 8,000 power here, swing for 28. If they didn't get a trigger, you can put the 8,000 on here, which means he's going to swing for the nice numbers. So this is going to be like the 4th attack. He's going to be swinging for like 53, which is really hard for them to guard as well. And then because this is the 5th attack, you're going to actually swing for really nice numbers with Influent Dagger behind the Maelstrom as well. So that's all things to keep in mind too. So just to go over that, you always want 1 powerhouse, 1 restander, Maelstrom as your Vanguard, and a potential 2nd powerhouse to be out on your field. If you check a critical trigger and they're not at 4 damage, you want to put the crit on a rear guard, just so that you have the extra guard pressure and you don't give them free counterblasts. You need to distribute the power from triggers and Theos effectively so that if they hit damage triggers, you can still hit, because Aqua can still do that, and you do not need front triggers to do this. And the last thing I wanted to go over was Diamantes. If you get a crit, always put it on Diamantes, because he can swing twice with that crit, and you want to be able to rip tons of cards out of your opponent's hand for a -1 to yourself, which is just incredible. Late game, typically you don't even need restanding units, and you could have something like this here, and you could swing with this guy first and hit 28 against Force Clans, which is really nice by himself, swinging that high. So that's just something else to keep in mind as well, is you can use his first ability to some effect as well, because you don't need to restand. It's not something you 100% want to do, but you do want to hit really nice numbers, so they have to drop extra cards from their hand. So if they're at like 5 damage and you're swinging first with Diamantes, it's a really nice late game card to have as a first swing. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And I think that's all I wanted to talk about for combos. So that's the video. Thanks for watching. As always, if you have any questions, leave it in the comments below. If you have any disagreements with my deck list, with my combos, what should attack first and when, leave that in the comments below too. I'm always happy to discuss and try and better my play, or educate people who might be having the wrong idea about something. So that's always nice. And if you want to see more of this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Vanguard content, because I really like this game and I want to do more on it. So thanks for watching. This is Antimatter signing out. Peace.